Our fourth inventor is Grace Carpenter Hudson, though she was most known for her paintings depicting Pomo Indians living in California's Mendocino and Lake counties. Much of Grace's life was spent in Ukiah, the Mendocino County seat, and this little town is located about 115 miles northwest of San Francisco. Grace was born, along with her twin, Grant, on February 21, 1865, in Potter Valley, about 18 miles northeast of Ukiah. Her dad was Aurelius Armando A.O. Carpenter, considered a California pioneer, and he was initially a rancher and newspaperman. Grace's mom was Helen McCowan, and she was at first a school teacher. Aurelius and his wife were both from Kansas Territory, and they were also some of the first white settlers in Potter Valley. They noticed how the Indians were being treated. Best land was taken by the newcomers, and the Carpenters became quite paternalistic toward the Native Americans. In fact, Pomo Indians regularly visited the Carpenter home, and both Helen and A.O. became interested in Pomo culture and art. In addition, Grace and her mom began collecting Pomo baskets, some of the best among Native American creations. When Grace was 4 years of age, her family moved to Ukiah, and her parents opened a photography studio. It was in Ukiah that Grace finished grammar school, and where the last Carpenter child, Frank, was born. In addition, Grace began drawing in her spare time. And since there was no high school in town, it was necessary to send Grace to San Francisco for the rest of her education. She actually lived in boarding houses. There was a chaperone, and began her further schooling in 1879, about age 14. Grace eventually attended the San Francisco School of Design and demonstrated an unusual artistic talent. In fact, in 1881, she received the prestigious Alvord Gold Medal for her work. Also, one of her teachers indicated that she was the most talented pupil I ever had. However, it wasn't all about schooling, since Grace was a pretty brunette who had many beaux. Periodically, especially in the summers, Grace would return to Ukiah, where she helped her parents in their photography business. It was there she learned more about lining and composition. However, her last term of school ended December 1883, and when she returned to her parents' home, she was already in love with William T. Davis, a man 15 years older than herself. The parents, of course, disapproved, but Grace and William eloped to San Francisco September 17, 1884, and married. However, by December 1886, their divorce was finalized, and Mrs. Grace Davis returned to Ukiah. She continued to help in the photography business and gave art lessons. Grace eventually met John Wills Hudson, a homeopathic physician who moved to San Francisco in 1889 and initially worked for the San Francisco and North Pacific Railroad Company. However, he began treating the Pomo Indians and sometimes provided abortions. This caused him to lose the number of his white patients. John was from Tennessee and had received a medical degree from Vanderbilt. However, his parents were quite conservative, and this was the opposite of what John had become. Hence, he was attracted to the bohemian ways of Grace and her family. And on April 30, 1890, John and Grace were married in a small ceremony at home. Both John and Grace liked the outdoors, music, art, and were educated people. Furthermore, they were interested in the Pomo Indians, and it was John who encouraged Grace to start sympathetically and sensitively painting the Pomo. John was also an amateur anthropologist and more spent time on his avocation. In the summer of 1891, Grace started numbering the paintings that she thought were of professional quality. In addition, her dad began photographing her numbered and unframed works. This acted to preserve them for posterity as her creations were purchased and found new homes. Grace had also continued her basket collecting, though by 1893 she tried to sell them at the Mechanics Fair in San Francisco. There were no buyers, and the collection was not sold until 5 years later to the Bureau of Indian Ethnology. The BAE was the first potential customer approached. About that time, John wrote Pomo Basket Makers, and this appeared in the Overland Monthly magazine. This article gained him a little more recognition in the hobby John wanted as his profession. When the BAE eventually purchased the baskets, they required John to create a catalog describing each work. When completed, the BAE curator thought that John's compilation was the best scientific collection of basketry known to the writer. John seized this opportunity to change careers, and by the fall of 1900 had been appointed as assistant ethnologist at Chicago's Field Columbian Museum. In fact, John was assigned to study the different languages of California Indian tribes. Grace continued her painting and produced over 130 canvases in the years 1896 through 1900. However, the family needed this income. Many paintings were indeed sold, since John had ceased working as a physician. Unfortunately, by 1900, Grace's health was failing, and she had been encouraged to try the climate of Hawaii. Ocean locations were thought to be life-prolonging. Grace headed out on December 26, 1900, and she spent 11 months on Oahu and the Big Isle in Hawaii, from January through most of November 1901. While there, she produced many paintings depicting the Hawaiian people. However, the separation was very difficult in their marriage, though Grace wrote often, sending her letters back to the U.S. by steamship. Nevertheless, Grace returned to the U.S. mainland, all there was at that time, by November of 1901, and she was reunited with her husband. The Hudsons remained together for the rest of their lives. By 1906, John resigned his position over the fact that someone had published his work without attribution. John was never employed for the remainder of his life, and Grace was the sole breadwinner in their family. However, she seemed to accept this with relative ease, since she had become a respected artist and her paintings had a market. Furthermore, artistry seemed to run in the family, and Grace's twin, Grant, though trained as a lawyer and first working in San Francisco, eventually became a screenwriter. He created many scripts for silent movies in the years 1920 through 1926. By December 23, 1930, Grace filed her first patent, and this was in regard to some toy rabbits she had created to entertain Pomo children. At that time, the places where California Indians lived were called rancherias, so Grace invented a rabbit rancheria, patterning the rabbits after boudoir dolls collected by young women of the 1920s and 1930s. Her Hopi family consisted of Grandpa, Mama, Junior, sister, twins, baby, and Wong, a Chinese housekeeper. She also constructed a house, a wishing well, a washing board with clothes tub. There were papier-mâché stones, mushrooms, sticks, and logs, and it was a very fanciful world indeed. In 1931, she copyrighted her Woodsy Weekly, which detailed the adventures of this rabbit family. However, it was probably her friend Genevieve Pfeffer Warfield, another inventor, who encouraged Grace to file for a design patent about how a creation looks and not its usefulness. On December 23, 1930, Grace received her patent, number D0083447, on February 24, 1931, and the following figure shows the drawing she included. I also saw a sketch provided by the curator of the Grace Hudson Museum, but this was not actually part of the issued patent. However, the sketch seemed to describe the internal construction or framework of the rabbit. Unfortunately, Grace didn't include a support for the ears, and these did have a tendency to break off. Hence, this might not have been a practical doll should it have been manufactured. Also, as indicated, design patents deal with how something appears and not really how it works, or the elements that make it useful. Hence, these are usually not very strong patents. In fact, they can sometimes be hard to defend, since one can make something similar in appearance, but sufficiently different to avoid infringement. It's more difficult if you've seen the original and purposely trying to go around it. Despite the family's photography business, there are not many available images of Grace Hudson. However, the one provided here is very nice. Grace completed many paintings during her lifetime, and one that can be shown is presented as follows. John Hudson died in 1936, and Grace's life ended due to a heart attack on March 23, 1937, at age 72. She had lived a reasonable number of years and had created many beautiful works of art. Yet there were no children, so her sensitive depictions of native people in California and Hawaii are her most important legacies.